Welcome to Tuesday Talks, your educational podcast helping parents become strong advocates for their kids and teachers to make big impacts in the classroom. Here we go. Hey, it's me, Dr. Tiffany, and I am here again with another episode of Tuesday Talks. So, welcome. If you are joining me for this first time, I'm glad that you have decided to take a listen. If this is your second, third, fourth, however many times listening, thanks for coming back again. And as always, share this episode with a colleague, a family friend, anybody who is interested in education, because this is a space where we don't just talk about education, we talk about how it actually shows up in real families, in real classrooms, and in real lives. And I wanted to take a moment to just pause at this first half of our season 3 and really create a space for reflection. Like, not a rerun of sorts, but a recap that's purposed. Because every episode this season has shared a common thread: voice, agency, and responsibility. I'm going to say those three again: voice, agency, and responsibility. And whether we're talking to parents, educators, school leaders, or students themselves, because my son has been on this season, one message kept rising to the surface: education works best when we stop waiting for permission and start partnering with intention. Just think about that for a moment. Education works best when we stop waiting for permission and start partnering with intention. So, today, I'm going to walk through some of the biggest takeaways that I found myself from these past episodes over the last 2 months, and also what others have shared with me as their biggest mindset shifts and moments that stayed with them, and moments that stayed with me too, from advocacy to teacher safety to social emotional learning to leadership and family connection. And we're going to talk about all of that tonight. So let's go ahead and get into it. Our first recap, I want to talk about when we had our guest, Danita Bird, on. Remember, this was the mom who decided public school is not the move for my kid. And in third grade, decided to take her child out and do homeschool. And this episode was really about parents taking control of their child's education. And one of the most grounding conversations that we had this season was with Danita Bird, who really reminded us that advocacy isn't loud, it is informed. And she really shares some, I think, very reflective key takeaways in that episode: that parents don't need to be experts, they just need clarity. Advocacy is really proactive and not reactive. She knew that what she was seeing in her daughter's day-to-day classroom behavior, activities, her learning was not what her daughter needed. And so she didn't wait to see things maybe get worse. She decided to take that proactive step and make a shift from what they had come to know as normal to create a new normal. And really, she talked a lot about not needing that permission to protect her child's education. She talked with some family members, some try to talk her out of it, give the school one more chance. Maybe a different school would be great. But as a family, they decided that homeschool was the best option. Now, in the midst of starting up with homeschool, she shares some really profound growth moments. And they're not sure that homeschool will be what they choose next year. But they took that power of being the parent to make what they thought was the best choice for their child in the moment. And it just really showed that you don't have to be an expert as a parent in education, but you do have to be engaged. And I felt like this episode really set the tone for season 3. It reframed advocacy as something that's really accessible and not intimidating. And it really reminded us that when parents understand their role, children benefit. They benefit across academics, across behavior, across emotional well-being. So check out that episode if you missed it. It was really profound. And if you've ever thought about homeschooling your kid, I think you'll find some really unique perspectives there that Danita shared that may give you some insight to know whether or not that's the right decision for your kid. Our next episode, we talked about this assumption that a 5-day school week was something that needed to happen because our assumptions are about time, productivity, and that is leading to burnout in teachers. More time doesn't always equal better learning. And we talked about some school districts that have implemented a 4-day school week. So their students go to school Monday through Thursday. Teachers work Monday through Thursday. Everybody's pay stays the same. Instructional learning time is the same. And student and teacher well-being were directly impacted in the research outcomes that are shared in that episode. And really, when we think about school, we think more time equals better academic learning. And that's not always the case, right? If you think back to your own time in school, more time in math class for me wasn't helping me become a better math student. It was actually making me more frustrated. And so I had to just take a couple of steps back and figure out my own path and how to navigate that. But it really was profound in the sense that teachers were learning that this sense of burnout was not a badge of honor. It was a warning sign that, like, listen, my health is going down, my emotional well-being is going down, my mental well-being is going down. This is too much. And so school districts, typically in more smaller rural areas where it's harder to recruit teachers to come in and work, we're trying out this 4-day school week and given full salary and only working 4 days a week. And so it really became a thought process and a question that it isn't about measuring success only by hours and test scores. Is that what we're measuring success on? How students do on a assessment? And I know a lot of school districts do. We talked about that on Tuesday Talks before. It is just part of the public school journey, these standardized tests. But this wasn't about endorsing or rejecting the model of a 4-day school week. It really was about asking better questions. Like, who's benefiting from a shorter school week? Who needs more support? And how often do we measure success beyond test scores? What are we looking at as far as how kids are showing up? Are they happier? Are teachers happier? Are they more engaged? Are they retaining more of the information that's being taught to them? And there were some research studies that really supported not only an increase in academic success, but also in a lower amount of behavioral challenges in schools as well. So definitely check out that episode if you have experienced a 4-day work week. I heard from a ton of people on social media how it was very divided. I will say that. Very much like, yes, we do. This is awesome. And then some that were like, no, this just creates more work when you are there if you take that 5th day off. So check out that episode and let me know what you think. We also talked about conflict, handling conflict. Like, how do kids learn that conflict isn't the problem, but avoidance is? And we dug deep into how kids navigate conflict. And really, what came out of that episode was that kids learn conflict resolution by watching adults, what we model as the adult, whether you're the adult and the parent at home, the caregiver at home, or you're the adult in the classroom as their teacher. They are watching how we respond to conflict and how we choose to resolve conflict. That's what really came out of all of the research that I shared in that episode. Avoidance teaches avoidance. If we teach kids to just avoid conflict, it's only teaching them more avoidance. There are situations where maybe just leaving something alone is the best solution. But there are moments where you need to show up, advocate for yourself, and really seek a collaborative resolution to whatever the conflict is. And thinking about repairing any relationship that has been impacted by conflict, whether it's a peer to peer friendship, a parent to teacher relationship, or partnership, repair is more powerful than punishment. So definitely check out that episode if you have talked about conflict with your kids, or maybe trying to figure out how to really approach that concept of conflict resolution, because Kids don't learn conflict resolution from lectures and from us standing in front of them telling them a whole bunch of information. They learn it from watching us. And regulation of their emotions, their words, it's something that's taught. It's not something that they just wake up and know one day. So it is something that as we think about social emotional learning in schools, that is an amazing way to help kids reflect first and then respond. And that really was kind of the crux of what that episode was about. Parents, we don't need perfect responses, but we need reflective ones. So I gave a lot of great takeaways for parents and teachers in that episode. So be sure to check that one out as well. And then we talked about teacher safety, something that I have not experienced directly, but I have been a part of situations where teachers are getting assaulted, whether it's verbally or physically by their students. And this was one of the most emotionally charged episodes of the season because teacher safety and student support are not opposing goals. We dug deep into what that manifestation of a disability looks like, what all goes into that process, because a lot of times these kids that are assaulting teachers verbally or physically, they have IEPs. And so there's a different set of rules regarding discipline for those students. And there's a whole process that you have to go through. And in that process, I talked about in that episode and outlining what those steps are, it can really pit teacher against parent or parent against school because it's kind of designed to say, okay, who wasn't doing their job as far as following the IEP that allowed this physical or verbal assault to occur. But accountability can coexist with compassion, and really systems fail when safety concerns are minimized. So I love this episode because it really touched on some of the experiences that I've had. And it really spoke to the fact that teacher safety and student support are not competing priorities. Because when we protect teachers, we are supporting students. And both of those two things can happen at the same time. In this episode, forced us to sit with kind of that feeling of discomfort because it asked us to hold two truths at once. And it challenged leaders, it challenged parents, and it challenged educators to stop passing responsibility and really coming together to collaborate. So, definitely, if you're a special education teacher or your child receives special education services, check out that episode. I really dive deep into the manifestation of the disability in that episode as well. And we talk about some of that IEP language. We had another special guest, Corey Green, who teaches at Head Start foundation of student learning, because if students aren't able to regulate their emotions and understand how to respond, what to do with these feels on the inside, they're not ready to learn. That's basically how that all breaks down. And SEL, social emotional learning, it is not extra. It is essential. Emotional regulation that's a life skill. It's not some soft skill that you can do with or without. That is a life skill. And again, if that is not something that's at the foundation of a student's day-to-day walk as they come through our doors as teachers and leaders in the school, then they're not able to access learning because they're dysregulated. And I know if you're in education, you've seen students come in who are emotionally dysregulated. And so STL wasn't framed as a program, but really as a practice. And we talked about how to be practical about implementing parts of that framework into everyday life. Remember, we're talking about education, not just as it occurs within the four walls of a school, but how this impacts everyday life as well. So definitely check out that episode. We tapped into emotional literacy as well as how that impacts behavior, academics, and relationships. And once again, we've talked about it many, many times here. But again, adults must model the regulation they expect from kids. I'm going to say it again. Adults must model the regulation they expect from kids. It is silly of us as adults to think that you can wild out, but tell your kid to act right. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's just that simple. So definitely check out that episode because I want you to start thinking about social emotional learning is not the soft kind of, oh, this is a fluffy little thing, something extra for us to do in the classroom. It really is strategic. And when it's done well, it can transform school culture. And we really talked about that a lot in the episode as well. Then we got to one of my favorite episodes of the season where we talked about student led conferences as opposed to teacher led conferences. And we did 2 episodes because I got a lot of feedback after that first episode. And these episodes really work together to show what's possible when students are invited into their own learning process. That preparation on the kids' end, it really empowers the student, and the student hears their voice and it creates more ownership of their work, more motivation to turn things around. And it really supports this idea that conferences shouldn't be performative. Oh, let me show you all the work that I've done as the teacher. It should be collaborative, where the student is saying, this is what I've learned. This is where I've been challenged. This is where I don't care. And that opens up more conversation as well, because I got some feedback like, hey, these kids are coming to the conference. They don't have nothing to say. They don't have anything to share. They either come and leave or they just kind of fold their arms and sit back. And like I said in that episode, that is just as informative as the child who sits and talks about all that they've learned and what they've been challenged by. So these conferences shouldn't feel like performance reviews. They should really be a collaboration between teacher, student, and parent, with the student being at the head, because that partnership starts when everyone comes to the table informed, and it helps students find that clarity and that confidence in their voice. Because when families feel respected, included, included and chosen to be in collaboration with, it just blossoms the whole relationship. And I watched my son in his student led conference, and it wasn't just a proud mom moment, even though I was proud. It was proof that when students are trusted, they can rise to the occasion. And please believe that all of the things that he shared, I shared a clip in that episode from his student led conference. What he shared that he was going to do, that's something I bring back to top of mind for him as we have moved on from his student led conference. Hey, remember, you said you were going to do this and this. It wasn't me imposing my to-do list on him. It was him saying, this is what I'm going to do. And I remind him of his own words, and it just hits different. So definitely check out that episode. If you have or have not experienced student-led conferences, it's a great episode to check out. Up next, we had another special guest, Dr. Jamila Singleton. She really talked about leadership and how that looks in schools. She is in charter schools in a leadership role. And she really talked to us about how leadership isn't just a slogan, it is about structures, and also shed some light on how equity lives in daily decisions and not just mission statements, right? We know school districts, charter schools especially, have their mission statement, they're mission driven, all of those things. But the equity really comes in the daily decisions that the school makes. And she shared a lot about how her own personal experiences have really informed her in the position of leadership that she's in right now in the charter school in Vancouver. And so she reminded us that transformation, it isn't fast, it is not flashy, it's not comfortable, but it is possible when leaders are courageous and consistent. Those 2 things she talked about, being courageous and being consistent. Check out that episode. We talked for almost an hour and really got insight on how to, you know, interact and meet any resistance from veteran educators that come to the table saying, hey, I don't need all this new age stuff. I know how to teach. I've been doing this for 30 years. how to approach those teachers and see them as a source of wisdom, not resistance. And it really was eye opening for me because have seen good leaders and I've seen not so good leaders, just to be honest. And so to hear what has informed her and how she makes day to day decisions was really eye opening. So definitely check out that episode as well. And then we wrapped up with a great family fun lifestyle episode with special guest Hannah Werner. And this episode really, we talked about how to enjoy this winter break because we're getting ready to come up on 2 weeks of having our kids at home with us. And that can be a lot. These are the moments I think when parents fully realize maybe how much of a handful their kids are because now they're home with us for the next 2 weeks. And, we may say teachers get a break. They have their own families as well and own kids to, you know, in, entertain of sorts. So some of the key takeaways from that lifestyle episode with Hannah really was like memories that we're creating during winter break don't have to be perfect, but meaningful. If you're that parent who's putting this pressure on yourself to be as engaging as possible during the winter break, to make sure that everything's perfectly done during winter break, take that pressure off of yourself. Know that that family connection, it doesn't need to be curated because joy is that protective factor, creating moments that aren't perfect but moments where you're present. And it's more than just being productive, right? We talked about some strategies and ways that you can engage with your kids, have them engage with you. We shared some family traditions that our families do to share options for you as well. Even talked about developing that kindness muscle as well, kindness muscle. And we gave some ways for you to do that too during this holiday season and winter break. These conversations really reminded us that education doesn't stop at the classroom door, and neither does the impact of the things that we do in schools and things that parents are doing at home as well. So, if I had to summarize this half of our season 3 so far in just one word, I think it would be agency because we talked about agency for parents, agency for teachers, agency for students, and agency for leaders. And it wasn't just about quick fixes in any of these episodes that we talked about. It was about a shared responsibility, whether we're talking about social emotional learning, conflict resolution, even enjoying winter break. It's about a shared responsibility because you can't fully put the responsibility of education at the feet of teachers. You just can't because everything that a kid needs to know to be educated cannot happen within the four walls of a school. It's just not how it works. So if teachers are doing their parts, parents are doing their parts, leaders in the schools are doing their parts, and our community is doing their part as well, because they're a part of that as too. That's when we see real change happening. And as we close out, I just want to leave you with this. Every conversation this season reminded us that education isn't just about policy, schedules, and programs. It really is about people. It's about, parents choosing to step into advocacy instead of waiting on the sidelines. It's about educators asking for safety and support. It is about students being trusted with their own voices. It's about leaders being brave enough to listen, to reflect, and to implement change. And really, if one episode resonated with you more than others, that's not an accident. That's information. That's the cue for you to lean in, to ask questions, and take action right where you are. Whether you are a parent, a teacher, an administrator, advocate, you are part of the ecosystem. And even when one part of that system shifts, the ripple effect matters. Think about that. When one part of that ecosystem, even just one part of it, when it shifts, the ripple effect matters. And so I want to thank you for sharing these conversations. Thank you for being a part of the Tuesday Talks community and really believing that education can be better because that is what drives me to even do this podcast. I believe education can be better when we do the work together. So be sure to check out next week's episode. Go back, listen to episodes you might have missed, share them, jot down some key takeaways, connect with me on social media at Dr. Tiffany SLP on Instagram and on TikTok. And let's have a conversation about it, because education really does matter. And I truly believe there's no teacher who ever went into the profession wanting kids to not grow, wanting kids to not learn. And there's no parent on this planet that sends their kid to school every day for their kid to come back knowing less than when they went to school. It just doesn't happen. So I think if we can start from that place and understanding that each part, parent and teacher, are sending these babies to school and out into the world with the best intentions, then I think we can build off of that for some impactful change. So again, thank you for joining me for another episode of Tuesday Talks. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, all the social media stuff, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks. Have a good one. Be sure to share this episode and join me next week for a brand new Tuesday Talks. See ya.